My video for July the 5th, 2018 is entitled The Meaning of July 4th. To Americans familiar only with Patrick Henry's blazing liberty or death oration of 1775, it may come as a shock to learn that he opposed the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. Henry always had a flair for the dramatic, but Mother Nature offered him an improbable assist. As he thundered against the dangers of the new centralized government, a howling storm rose outside the Richmond Hall. Frightened delegates scurried to take cover. A memorable scene, to be sure. But how could the man who penned "Give me liberty or give me death," this partner who penned Virginia's resolve against the Stamp Act of 1765, not support the Constitution? The answer was pretty simple. Henry thought that the American Revolution was at root a rebellion against the coercive power of the British government. In particular, it was a rebellion against unjust British taxes. Henry therefore thought it was madness for Americans to place that same kind of consolidated political authority over themselves again. Yes, I've been looking a lot at the early documents and history of the founding fathers, as they are referred to, and was actually going to make this video for my July the 4th video, and it is being recorded on July the 4th, even though it's the video for the July the 5th and won't go live until the 5th. I have seen many things that are puzzling to me and should be puzzling to a lot of people. He was a lawyer, for example. And many of the founding fathers were lawyers. And I know some people may have been under the mistaken assumption that lawyers were a forbidden classification among the early American patriots and the early things. Abraham Lincoln was the first attorney to become U.S. president. Now, what's the difference between an attorney and a lawyer? A lawyer is someone who helps defend a person's rights against abuse, whether it's personal abuse or the abuse of government. A bar attorney is one who belongs to a club called the British Accredited Registry, and it aligns the individual with Britain higher than his alignment to being just simply a U.S. National. I don't want to use the word citizen because that also has a dual meaning. Just like attorney and lawyer, people think, well, they're interchangeable terms. No, they're not. An attorney is one who binds you to a foreign power or to a false law, as opposed to a real law. Real laws are natural, and that's where you get the term natural law, and are not just legal instruments. Everything in the legal system is fiction. They just make up rules that protect a certain class of people against another class of people, and bar, and I'm using that term now as in prohibit, not bar attorney, but as in prohibiting people from standing up for natural rights. It's our natural right to speak our mind. It's our natural right to worship or not worship. I know I've covered this in other videos, and I will continue to mention that from time to time because it's so important to know that we have natural rights. And the other natural right, of course, that I have mentioned is the right to bear arms or to protect ourselves. Now, it's impossible for us to protect ourselves against an enemy that is invisible and uses coercive and subterfuge, coercive practices and subterfuge to deceive us. The practice of attorneys is deception. Whether you realize that or not, they are deceiving the court. Now, I could cover lots of things that I've uncovered over the years, and there are many things, but I choose to speak in small 10-minute segments to get you to curiously investigate. And Patrick Henry believed that under a federal government, as it was being instituted by the Constitution, would simply be another tyranny, just like the one that they had experienced under Britain, to be taxed without representation, to have foreign troops put into our homes, things like that, to lose human rights and not have value as an individual human being to freely express themselves. So Patrick Henry was the one who insisted that the Bill of Rights be added. Now, he served as governor of Virginia for 3 years, and then he took a little leave. I think they were 2-year terms. Then he took a leave, and then he served 2 more years. So 5 terms rather, he was the governor of the state of Virginia, which was actually a powerhouse in the American Revolution. It was people from Virginia like Thomas Jefferson and even George Washington that helped create the United States and give it a foundation that, of course, was being opposed by many people in the North, especially the state of New York and New Jersey and that general area in the Northeast. They tended to think a little bit more differently than those in the South, especially, again, the state of Virginia. That was the bastion, if you will, of the American Revolution. That, and of course Massachusetts, but Massachusetts, again, they weren't ideologically the same. In fact, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson often butted heads because they were 2 different parties. And of course, they died on the same day, as I covered in the previous video. The interesting thing to me is that he refused, that is, Patrick Henry refused to run for public office in the United States of America when it was founded. He was offered positions on the Supreme Court and other positions, and he turned them down. He had 17 children, as I think I said that in a previous video. I've talked about it in some other conversations that I've had, so I don't remember what I said in videos and what I just said in private conversations. But he had 6 children by his first wife, and then 11 more by his second wife when the first wife died. So he was certainly an interesting person, and I use that word again, and that's really a legal term. He was an interesting man, and we could learn a lot if we went back and did a little bit of digging and exploring. Now, some people get really hung up on repeating things over and over again, and some may say that you do too, Ron. And I'm thinking now of a particular friend that I finally would inundate me with so much material that I'd end up not being able to read any of it because it was just overwhelming for me, because it wasn't delivered in little segments. It was dumped. And I understand that psychology of resisting being dumped on, which is why I try to do smaller, shorter videos. Anyway, folks, it's certainly interesting to study the meaning of things and to get beyond our current thinking, which we have to do if we're going to rise up and become truly free at last. Thank you for listening, and namaste.